You don't decide to change. You don't announce it. There is no declaration. Instead, something subtler happens. A pause appears where there used to be urgency. A breath remains unfilled. A familiar emotional signal enters the room, and for the first time, you don't rush toward it. No alarm sounds. No inner voice commands you to fix, soften, absorb, or translate. There is simply stillness. And in that stillness, something unsettling arrives alongside the relief. Because for most of your life, your safety depended on being the one who noticed first, adjusted fastest, carried the most. This is often how the good daughter identity begins to dissolve. Not through rebellion, but through exhaustion so deep it changes perception. 1. When adaptation becomes identity. For a long time, your nervous system learns something essential. Connection is preserved when I regulate the emotional field. No one told you this directly. It formed quietly through pattern, repetition, and relief. When tension rose, you intervened. When emotions overflowed, you absorbed. When silence felt dangerous, you filled it. And the system stabilized. Your psyche rewarded this behavior not with praise, but with safety. This is how adaptation becomes identity. You weren't just a person in these relationships. You became a psychological regulator. You carried what others could not tolerate, translated what could not be spoken, made unbearable emotions manageable by holding them inside yourself. This was never explicitly asked of you. It emerged as an unconscious bargain. If I carry the weight, I'll belong. As a child, this doesn't feel like self-erasure. It feels like intelligence, sensitivity, being good, and the psyche reinforces whatever ensures survival. But what once protected you eventually begins to cost you. 2. The mother and father complexes and lived experience. In Jungian language, these patterns often organize themselves through what Carl Jung described as complexes, not abstract ideas, but living emotional structures. The mother complex doesn't announce itself as theory. It shows up as a feeling responsible for another person's mood, stopping yourself from speaking honestly to avoid upsetting her, or interpreting disappointment as a verdict on your worth. Your needs feel negotiable. Hers feel urgent. The father complex often appears differently. As an internal authority you can never quite satisfy. As approval you keep hoping will arrive without self-abandonment. Together, these create a posture where you are always slightly leaning forward, listening, adjusting, anticipating. You do not demand presence. You offer service. Over time, this posture becomes so internalized that you mistake it for love itself. But care that requires self-erasure is not intimacy. It is fusion. If this resonates, stay with me. And if you feel this moment describing your life right now, consider subscribing, because this channel exists for those standing at the threshold of inner change. 3. When the old bargain begins to fail. The shift does not arrive dramatically. It arrives as fatigue, a heaviness inside that no longer responds to emotional noise. Others feel this before you do. They sense a delay, a resistance that is not defiance, but absence. A parent speaks with a familiar tone of expectation and subtle accusation. You respond neutrally, accurately. The conversation falters. A sibling shares a complaint that once would have drawn you in. You listen, but you don't dissolve into reassurance. The silence afterward feels loud. Someone fills it quickly. Someone always does. But you are already no longer where you used to be. This is destabilizing not because you've changed in character, but because you've stopped performing a function. If this insight is landing for you, pause the video, breathe, and stay present. Transformation often begins exactly here. 4. Projection, shadow, and emotional load-bearing. In Jungian terms, you carried unintegrated shadow material for others. Feelings they could not own. Conflicts they could not face. Vulnerabilities they could not bear. You became the container. As long as you remained open, they remained intact. When you begin to close, even slightly, the system reacts. Projection does not require words. It operates through expectation. You may notice irritation, confusion, a guilt tripping, a sudden concern. These are not attacks. They are attempts to restore equilibrium. When you stop absorbing what is not yours, others must carry it or drop it. There is no drama here, only consequence. And consequence feels personal to those who relied on you unconsciously. 5. The collapse of repetition compulsion. You may notice repetition across relationships. Different people. Same emotional outcome. This is not coincidence. It is repetition compulsion, the psyche's attempt to resolve an early wound by recreating its conditions. Each time, a part of you hoped, this time my devotion will be met without cost. But the reward was never happiness. It was familiarity. And familiarity eventually loses its power. As the pattern dissolves, the reward disappears. You no longer feel purposeful through being needed. The relief fades faster. The cost becomes visible. This is not selfishness. It is obsolescence. 6. The quiet phase. Most people misunderstand this. Life may feel strangely empty. Not because nothing is happening, but because so much energy has been withdrawn from emotional management. You may feel dull, restless, invisible. This is not regression. This is reorganization. Old reflexes still fire. The urge to explain, soothe, rescue, but they no longer carry conviction. You hesitate. And in that hesitation, a boundary begins to form. Not a wall, a cinder. If you're finding language here for something you felt but never named, consider sharing this video. Others are walking this threshold too. 7. Guilt as a regulatory reflex. Guilt appears not because harm was done, but because expectation was unmet. Guilt is the psyche's attempt to restore the old behavior. It whispers, you're becoming selfish. You're withholding. You're losing something essential. But look closely. The guilt does not arise from cruelty. It arises from no longer managing someone else's nervous system. This is where many people turn back. But you don't, because something in you now knows the cost. 8. Containment versus control. There comes a moment where someone is clearly distressed and waits. In the past, this was your cue. Now you remain present, but still. You don't soothe. You don't fix. The moment stretches. This is not cruelty. This is containment. Containment allows experience to exist without interference, and this capacity is new. You are learning to tolerate tension without absorbing it. That is not withdrawal. That is maturity. 9. Authority moves inward. You begin making small decisions without justification. How long you stay. When you leave. Whether you return a call. They don't feel rebellious. They feel ordinary. And that ordinariness is the point. Authority is no longer borrowed. It is internalized. You no longer confuse disappointment with damage. Others metabolize their feelings themselves. And you stay where you are. 10. The end of the good daughter identity. This identity ends not through rejection, but completion. It protected you once. It cannot take you further. What replaces it is not hardness. It is integrity. Love now has edges. Compassion has shape. Presence no longer requires performance. You are not less loving. You are less diffuse. And that is how the psyche finally rests. If this journey resonated, subscribe to the Mind Kit, leave a comment, and allow this work to continue unfolding with you.